Okay, now that you all have had some time to discuss the last module, we will hear from Jennifer from Pennsylvania, and she will be talking about navigating relationships and what it means to look at the blurring of lines, especially of governing boards and advisory boards, and then how to work on clarifying and making the lines clearer. So, Jennifer?
I want to begin by saying that so much of Carla's presentation really hit home with me as our organization went through many of those same exercises in terms of looking at old agreements and governing documents and finding that in the way we were working today over time, we had moved away from a lot of the practices that were so clearly defined in early documents. But how very difficult that is to go back into communities and revisit those conversations, because sometimes perception becomes reality, and allowing those activities to go on for an extended period of time and not annually reviewing documents, I think, is what leads so many organizations to these types of challenges over time. So I really was so impressed with Carla's detail, and I think she's provided a lot of great information for other community foundations to consider as they either embark on this advisory and affiliate board work, or as they make decisions on how they're working with their current boards. So a little bit about our story. And a little bit of history about the First Community Foundation Partnership of Pennsylvania, which we call FCFP. We were founded in 1916 by resolution of a bank board. We're actually the 9th oldest community foundation, and celebrating our 100th anniversary in 2016. We incorporated in 1989 as the Williamsport Lycoming Foundation. That name eventually would be changed after we professionalized a little more and started expanding our geographic footprint. So we had our first full-time paid executive in 1997. And we expanded and started doing affiliate work, though we didn't, I don't think, call it that at the time. We did that in 1999. So by 2004, we were working in 4 counties via 3 or 4 affiliates. And at that time, they made the decision to create a new name that was reflective of our history, and also didn't specify one particular county in an effort to be more inclusive of all of those affiliate organizations. So they did that in 2004. And at that time, they started thinking about board expansion and really including more board of directors members who were from all of our neighboring counties, as opposed to just the Lycoming County where we were headquartered. They did that in 2009 officially, and they also did a beautiful rebranding job with a firm called Ology, and really had a much more regional look and regional approach to the way that we were marketing. That being said, we still continued to utilize those independent community names, and we still had 4 different sets of letterhead at that time. And so while we had spent all this money on rebranding, we were still marketing inconsistently across our region. In 2010, we went through a strategic plan, and it was actually the time that I joined the Community Foundation. I came in as a fundraiser in their development department. We have 9 employees here at FCFP, and I was doing fundraising for them, and it was right at the beginning of a strategic plan process that they were going through with Aspen Institute. And it was really the creation of that strategic plan and all of the homework that was done that really was the impetus for the board to consider how we wanted to move into the future. So to talk a little bit more about how we got to the position we were in 2010, as we were going through that strategic plan, it was clear that we had a real identity crisis. We had done this wonderful branding. We had a new logo, a new name. We were talking a lot about our mission and vision regionally, but we weren't acting that way on a daily basis. And so our board was really focused on looking at our governance and our bylaws, and in doing so, we had a lot of conversations with our attorney, and we identified a lot of inconsistent policies and acknowledged the importance of us being true to the regional message that we were sending and being reflective a lot of the nonprofits that were working regionally in our community. Much like Carla said earlier, we realized that many of our nonprofit providers that we were supporting through grants and resources were also working regionally, and we were within 60 miles of all of our affiliates. It only made sense to strengthen our forces together. So we made a lot of bylaw changes, and we went through this strategic plan with Aspen Institute, did a very real situational assessment in all of our communities, and identified new goals and the success indicators. And ultimately, based on what those goals were, we decided we needed to change the way that we were operating our model. Ultimately, it was decided that the way that we were working as a staff and as a board of directors was not in tandem with how we were operating our affiliate models. And when I go back and look at the situational assessment that was done prior to my starting, I think one of the main lines that really strikes me is, I have on the slide, is that our board of directors clarified in that process that while providing excellent staffing, systems, and services to affiliates was a critical role of CCFE to fulfill its mission, it was not the mission itself. In fact, during that time, we came up with a new mission statement, and I'll share that with you because it's something that we're very cognizant of today, and led us to our vision statement, really, which is quite simply, our vision is to quite simply create powerful communities through passionate giving. And we do that through our mission statement, which is to improve the quality of life in North Central Pennsylvania through community leadership, the promotion of philanthropy, the strengthening of nonprofit impact, and the perpetual stewardship of charitable assets. So during that assessment, and we came up with our goals, we decided we really needed to go back and look at our fund documents. And we took a challenging look at all of the fund documents that we had for our funds versus the affiliate agreements, and recognized that the legal agreement with our fund holders, we felt, was the most important thing that we needed to be true to in the work that we did on a daily basis. And under that structure, we decided we were going to create new memorandums of understandings in the 3 affiliates that we were working in 2010. Those new agreements were shared with all of our affiliate organizations, as well as our overarching strategic plan. So much like Carla described, we went out and we were meeting with all of those boards and talking about the reasons why we felt we needed to change the structure and have more consistent policies that were reflective of our bylaws. A lot of talk about term limits and the way that grant making was being done and fundraising was being done and how we were marketing ourselves. And we felt there would be more strength in numbers if we could do that as a one regional community foundation, which legally is what we were. So we had a few goals that we shared, and I won't go into the details of those, but basically they covered a lot about regional leadership. What was our grant-making impact? The ability to address issues locally and regionally, and increase our visibility and participation in all of our communities, and of course improve our development efforts. So ultimately, 2 out of the 3 affiliates that we were working with, which was the majority of the assets of the community foundation, decided that they wanted to move into the new model that we were proposing, which wasn't any true change in our model. It was just being true to the bylaws of our organization. But one decided ultimately that they wanted to let go of the relationship, and we went back to their original agreement with us, and it had really had a very clear path as to what needed to happen for them to spin off, and it required a 501c3 for them to become their independent 501c3 organization, and we had talked for many months about how we might help them do that, despite the fact they hadn't met minimum thresholds. But ultimately, we decided that all of these discussions weren't healthy for any of our communities. And after enough time went by, we decided it was better to work with them to try and find a better solution, instead of just holding on to them or forcing them into a 501c3 that they were not ready to operate independently. And so there was a neighboring community foundation who was interested in taking over those assets, and ultimately we decided to make the transfer of $3 million. And I say that and it makes it sound like it was so simple. I assure you it was not. It took several years for us to actually go through that separation process. And there are some reasons for that. Ultimately, we decided that the philosophical differences in the vision of what our organization was different in that community than the way that FCFP was organized now. And despite the fact that we felt we had strong legal ground, all of those funds had been raised within our organization, we decided it was better to work with that community and support that community in the way that they wanted to go than to having a public legal battle about charitable assets. We remain committed to that community, but we did end up transferring about $3 million to a neighboring community foundation. Our agreement was not with the affiliate group itself. We worked directly with that foundation over time about how we would transfer those funds. Some of the funds within that community did stay with us. We went and reviewed all the fund documents, and in the case where we had living fund founders or fund holders, we asked about their preferences, about the work that we were doing and their thoughts about the affiliate advisory board's desire to move those funds. We made it very clear that this was not about donor control, but we were certainly interested in their perception and their perspective, and that we would consider what their preferences were when we were making the decision legally about what funds we were going to transfer. And we did that in close contact with the Pennsylvania Office of the Attorney General. Our attorney, probably over the course of 2 years, worked closely with that office to make sure that we were in compliance with laws in our state, but also with the blessing of that office. So we started those conversations in 2011, and the transfer took place in 2014 via a separation agreement that also went through our orphans court in our counties here. So about 50 funds left, totaling $3 million, and I would say maybe a dozen stayed from that community at about $1 million. So our structure today is very similar, although we don't use the term affiliate. We focus very much on regional advisory boards. Those advisory boards have very clear job descriptions about the field of interest funds that they help us manage in terms of grant making and fundraising. We have consistent special events in our community, so if we do an event in one county, we do almost a mirror event in another county so that it appears to be the same event in terms of the marketing, just the location is different. Since we've made the change, we have much better name recognition in our community despite our long-term service to our region. That identity crisis, it was very real when I initially came to the foundation in 2010. And when I became the president in 2011, the decision was already made to move in a different direction in terms of the way we were working with affiliate agencies or our affiliate boards around the region. But one of the things that really sticks with me is an example of an event that we had gone to, and I was at a nonprofit nonprofit fundraiser where another community member was being organized or was being recognized. And our president at the time, my predecessor, was being introduced, and I'll never forget that when she was introduced as the president of the Community Foundation, and they couldn't remember our name. And I believe the speaker at the time said, "Oh, I can't remember what you call yourselves these days." And that was a real sign that we had really lost a lot of ground in terms of recognition in the community, and that we needed to do a better job. And so since that time, through all of these efforts, we have increased our fundraising activities annually. We have met all of our strategic plan goals. We also do a regional 30-hour fundraiser, an online platform we call Raise the Region, a giving day, if you will. It raises over $1 million annually. Additionally, in the past 3 years, we've created a women's fund that is a regional fund that has over $250,000 that has been given just in the past 2 years to endow that, to ensure it remains here in perpetuity, and it attracts over 100 women annually to become annual members. So when I think back about what we might have done differently, a few things come to mind, and I'll share them in hopes that it could be helpful to other communities. From an organization, from FCFP's standpoint, even prior to my arrival, I think one of the things that they could have done was acted sooner. When I came here, they had already gone through this wonderful rebranding process, but in many ways, I think that's the last thing they should have done. They should have gone through that hard work of the situational assessment sooner and focused on the mission and vision sooner, and then to the strategic plan, and then had the conversation with the affiliates. It seems like we came up with this wonderful brand and vision for the organization, and then we had to go back and explain to everybody how we got there. And if we would have done it in a different order, I think maybe things could have been different. The importance of annual review of fund agreements or affiliate agreements is critical to make sure you stay in line with how you were initially formatted to be. And professionally, I believe that one of the things that I could have done professionally to improve the situation is I wish I would have contacted the Council on Foundations throughout the process. We've been a long member and are accredited through standards and have a great relationship with the council, and we certainly looked at their resources, but I think their legal team, certainly what I know today as the president of this organization, they could have been very helpful to us in the early stages of this and maybe guided us in some different directions sooner that could have avoided some of the issues that we ultimately came to. And personally, I think that I would have benefited from allowing more time. Even though the decision had been made when I came on as president, it was one of the things that I had to do initially in that role, and I didn't know many of those community members. So I wish I would have had a little more time and maybe would have asked for a little more patience with myself and with the board about how we might allow for me to become a little more involved in those communities before we had to go through that process of changing the way in which we were working. And just better understanding the motives of individuals and the control issues that can come up in communities, and how important it is for you to understand and work with the community members so that everybody is on the same page and hopefully everybody agrees to the same goals. So I hope that this is helpful in the sense that other organizations might be able to relate or potentially consider some of these points as they look at the model in which they might want to use in their own community. And another thing I wanted to mention in closing, I think Carla mentioned in one of her slides the river in the rural community that she works in. And it's interesting here in Pennsylvania. I'm also in a rural part of our state, and a lot of our communities are also along the river. And it's something that we talk about a lot. In fact, when we sit down and talk about what are the things that we can all relate to, the river is the first thing that comes to mind. So much so in our community that we've changed at the end of a board term, we give our chair and former board members a gift when they complete their service. And we've chosen these beautiful water pitchers that we use every year. And it symbolizes the water of the river that connects all of our communities across the region.
Jennifer, thank you for building on Carla's presentation and discussing the importance of brand, identity, and the river. We know community foundations are unique to the areas that they serve. Yet you've both shown us practices that transcend one community foundation's experience. It is so great to hear you reached out to the Attorney General. When I speak with Attorneys General, they want to be helpful. They don't want to be punitive. And if you can open yourself up to that relationship, there may be help, and there may be, as Jennifer emphasized, early steps that can be taken to mitigate much more later steps. I believe the saying is a stitch in time saves nine or something. I'm not great with sayings. So as we always end these, as an exercise, please discuss whether any of your funds have a brand that is not the Community Foundation brand. Think about whether the community understands the relationship to the Community Foundation. Are donors confused about who they are giving to? How can you identify the confusion or inconsistency?